In November 1994, the police station in Tsukuba City, Ibaraki Prefecture, Japan, received a disturbing missing persons report. The caller was Iwao Nomoto, his voice trembling through tears. "I can't find my wife and children anywhere. I came home and they were gone. Please help me find them." The police immediately launched an investigation in response to this man's desperate plea. The very next day, on November 3rd, multiple calls flooded into the police station from the Daikoku port area in Yokohama, a city just south of Tokyo. Witnesses who were walking and jogging along the port's promenade spotted a suspicious white object floating on the water. Many were horrified when they realized what appeared to be human legs protruding from what looked like a plastic bag. The Japanese Coast Guard swiftly arrived at the scene. As they approached by boat, they discovered it wasn't an ordinary plastic bag, but rather a large, sturdy sack similar to those used for storing rice. The sack was tightly bound with rope, with a heavy dumbbell attached to one end, clearly intended to sink it to the bottom. However, despite the weight, the sack had surfaced. When they opened the sack, a horrifying sight awaited the investigators. Inside was the body of a woman. The victim was identified as 31-year-old Eiko Nomoto, the wife whom Iwao had reported missing just the day before. The normally peaceful Daikoku port, where local residents regularly came for morning and evening walks, had suddenly become the scene of a gruesome murder. But this was only the beginning. Iwao had reported both his wife and children missing. Since the mother's body was found here, police conducted an extensive search of the area with the help of divers. 4 days later, on November 7th, they discovered the body of Amy, their 3-year-old daughter, and shortly after, on November 12th, they found the body of 1-year-old Yusaku, their son. Like their mother's body, the children were wrapped in white rice sacks, bound tightly with rope, and weighted down with dumbbells. The police didn't need much deliberation to conclude this was the work of a single perpetrator. Whoever killed the mother had also murdered the children. Notably, the rope knots on all 3 bodies were tied in a similar fashion. Who could be so cruel as to murder a woman and her children, then attach weights to ensure they would never surface? The investigation team conducted autopsies on all 3 bodies and made a significant discovery. None of the victims were wearing shoes, and their feet were remarkably clean. This suggested they were killed indoors and immediately placed in the sacks before being disposed of in the sea. Additionally, Eiko was wearing comfortable home clothes, no socks or stockings, and no jewelry such as earrings or necklaces. Therefore, police believed the murders took place in their home. Upon hearing the news, Iwao immediately rushed to the police station, crying hysterically and appearing completely devastated, a seemingly reasonable reaction for someone who had just lost his entire family in an instant. However, as he recounted the last time he saw his wife and children and what had happened, the investigators' keen gaze suddenly stopped at Iwao's wrist. The fresh scratches and abrasions scattered on it immediately raised the first suspicions in this case. When questioned about these injuries, Iwao explained that he owned a vicious dog that had bitten him. However, according to police observations, these marks didn't resemble bite wounds, but rather scratches and abrasions. This made Iwao the prime suspect. The police began investigating his activities before and after Eiko and the children disappeared, though initially they couldn't find any concrete evidence. The horrific case quickly dominated headlines and television news across Japan. Shocking headlines like "Mother and children's bodies found in sacks in the sea" stunned the nation. The public was horrified by the brutality of the crime. How could someone harm a toddler who had just learned to walk? Many expressed deep sympathy for the seemingly grief-stricken father facing the loss of his entire family. However, as the investigation proceeded, malicious rumors began circulating, causing additional harm to Eiko's memory. People gossiped that she had worked at nightclubs, lived extravagantly beyond her means, and might have been killed by yakuza or debt collectors. These baseless rumors were like a second death for Eiko, further tarnishing the reputation of someone who could no longer defend herself. Meanwhile, neighbors from the couple's residential area immediately suspected Iwao. They reported that the couple frequently argued, with their fights so loud that neighbors would be awakened in the middle of the night. The investigation team also gathered information about the couple's relationship. When police searched their house, they discovered Aiko's diary. It detailed the married life of Aiko and Iwao and the hardships she had endured. The contents didn't just cover personality differences, but also documented Iwao's infidelity. My husband didn't come home again today. Which woman is it this time? Is it a bar hostess? How can I make my husband love me? Iwao's infidelity wasn't just a one-time occurrence. It was constant. He was always looking for opportunities to have affairs with other women. The investigation team realized that Iwao had a potential motive for murder. With his pattern of continuous infidelity, he might have wanted to eliminate his family. The police officially named him as a suspect and brought him in for questioning. Iwao Nomoto was born in 1965 in Iwata Village, Ibaraki Prefecture. His parents were farmers, and he was their second son. From an early age, Iwao showed remarkable intelligence. He was such an exceptional student that people called him a prodigy. After graduating at the top of his class in both elementary and middle school, he entered a prestigious high school. His dream was to become a doctor. With his academic excellence, he easily gained admission to Tsukuba Medical School. He was the pride of not just his family, but the entire village. In 1990, he began his internship at the university hospital where he graduated. Up to this point, he appeared to be a normal person, intelligent, hardworking, and achieving his dreams. However, besides his dream of becoming a doctor, he had another goal: to delay marriage as long as possible. More specifically, he wanted to sleep with as many women as possible before getting married. He set himself a target: enjoy life until age 33, dating, affairs, visiting hostess bars, having fun without restraint, and only getting married when he had no regrets. During his university years, Iwao had a girlfriend who worked in an office, and they lived together. Since Iwao was still a student with no income, his girlfriend supported him financially. But showing no gratitude, he began cheating on her even then. At age 25, just starting his internship at the hospital, he joined a tennis club for hospital staff. There, he met Aiko, who would later become his wife. Aiko was 2 years older than him, 27 years old, and working part-time at the hospital's payment counter. She was a single mother, raising 2 children alone after her divorce. Iwao was immediately attracted to Aiko, but it wasn't true love. Despite living with his girlfriend, he persistently pursued Aiko. And Aiko, unaware of this man's dark nature, gradually fell in love with him. Aiko was born in 1963. After high school, while attending vocational school, she worked part-time at a soba noodle restaurant. There, she met and married the owner's son. They had 2 children and opened their own soba restaurant in Shibuya, but the business struggled. Their marriage deteriorated, and they divorced after 6 years. To support her 2 children, Aiko worked part-time at Tsukuba University Hospital during the day and as a hostess at night. That's when she met Iwao. After just 2 months of dating, they began living together. However, Iwao was already living with someone else. He was maintaining 2 households simultaneously. Then one day, Aiko announced she was pregnant. Iwao, still determined to have fun until 33, repeatedly pressured Aiko to get an abortion, and she eventually agreed. It was a devastating time for Aiko, as she hadn't wanted to terminate the pregnancy. While she was suffering from daily depression after the abortion, Iwao announced he wanted to break up. Aiko couldn't accept this and tried to hold on to the relationship. Looking back, it would have been better if they had separated then. It seems Aiko was too emotionally damaged to accept the breakup. The problem was that Iwao was maintaining 2 parallel relationships. He would spend one night at one house, the next at the other. Eventually, everything came to light. How long could such deception last? When his office worker girlfriend found out, she gave him an ultimatum. Who will you choose? Me or this woman named Aiko? After some consideration, Iwao decided to break up with Aiko. The office worker girlfriend thought the situation was resolved since they had separated the couple, but this was only temporary. In 1991, Aiko became pregnant again. This time she was adamant. I cannot abort this baby. Let's get married and raise it together. Iwao was at a loss for words. Having already requested one abortion, he couldn't ask for another. He was distressed. His goal of having fun until 33 wasn't even halfway achieved. At just 26, he still had 7 years to go before his target age for marriage. Finally, Iwao proposed a condition. We'll keep the baby and raise it together, but we won't register our marriage. Eiko agreed because she really wanted to have this child. If Iwao had any conscience, he should have broken up with his office worker girlfriend and committed to one relationship. Instead, he tried to keep his girlfriend, telling her, I'm not marrying Eiko, we'll break up soon. Once the baby starts walking, I'll assess the situation and resolve it. It was absurd. Eventually, he did break up with his office worker girlfriend and moved out of their shared home, but he continued seeing her secretly behind Eiko's back. Time passed, and in November 1991, their first daughter, Amy, was born. As agreed, Eiko and Iwao didn't register their marriage, and Iwao continued his free lifestyle, meeting other women with the mindset of, I have a child, but I'm still single. Meanwhile, Eiko constantly tried to earn Iwao's stable affection. She would wake up early to prepare breakfast, set out his toothbrush with toothpaste, and prepare his water cup, being a devoted wife and mother. Perhaps because of this, or maybe because they now had a child, Iwao finally agreed to register their marriage after their first child was born. The marriage registration took place on November 30th, 1991, and the very next day, December 1st, Iwao was transferred to Hitachi, Ibaraki Prefecture. It was about a 90-minute drive from their home. As a result, Iwao lived in a dormitory and couldn't return home daily, only visiting every few days. After about a month in Hitachi, he became bored. It was a small city with a population of about 160,000, without many bars or beautiful women, nothing much to do for entertainment. Then his philandering nature resurfaced. He began an affair with a nurse named Yumi, pseudonym, at the hospital where he was assigned. Yumi even had a key to Iwao's dormitory room. She would come to clean, do laundry, cook, and stay overnight, essentially establishing a second household. Eiko knew nothing about this. Until one day, 2 months after Iwao's transfer to Hitachi, Eiko made a surprise visit with their daughter. Perhaps following her intuition, Eiko carried their child to her husband's dormitory room and discovered a woman there. It wasn't just the woman. Yumi's clothes, shoes, and bags were there too, clearly showing they were living together. Iwao tried to explain. It's not like that. This city is too small, there are no motels, I just let her stay over. We're absolutely not living together. But Yumi wasn't the only woman Iwao was seeing. There was another nurse and a bar employee at a place he frequently visited. He was dating 3 women simultaneously, not counting Eiko. Even after Eiko discovered his relationship with Yumi, he didn't end it. They continued living together in the dormitory for another 9 months. During this time, Eiko became pregnant with their second child. She hoped that with a second child, Iwao would stop his affairs. Now there weren't just 1 but 2 children. At this point, Eiko's 2 children from her previous marriage were being raised by her ex-husband. So Eiko was living with just their first daughter and was pregnant with their second. During her second pregnancy, Eiko's health deteriorated severely and she had to be hospitalized for 3 months. During this time, Iwao was forced to care for their daughter Amy alone. Later in Eiko's diary, she wrote that this was the happiest period of their marriage. Isn't that heartbreaking? Even while sick in the hospital, she felt happy because her husband was at home, not going anywhere. During these 3 months of caring for their child alone, instead of realizing how challenging child-rearing was and regretting his affairs and mistreatment of his wife, Iwao immediately resumed his affairs as soon as Eiko gave birth to their second child, Yusaku, and was discharged from the hospital. It seemed as if his pent-up desires had been building up during that time. At this point, Iwao was transferred to work permanently at Toyowa Hospital in Sakai City, Ibaraki Prefecture. New hospital, new staff, new nurses. His eyes lit up when he met a nurse named Haru, also a pseudonym. Although Haru was married with children, they began an affair. Iwao seemed particularly infatuated with her. At this time, Iwao's after-tax salary was about 1 million yen per month, approximately 10,000 US dollars. This was considered a good salary. He used this money to buy expensive designer bags for Haru. At the hospital, they openly displayed their affection to the point where rumors spread, and they were called to the deputy director's office with warnings of dismissal if the rumors continued. Perhaps because of this warning, Haru came to her senses and wanted to end the relationship, saying they should break up. But Iwao was like a leech, refusing to let go, calling her, showing up at her house. Haru was clear. "I'm not that serious about this. I have children and a husband." She made a clean break, but Iwao continued his obsessive pursuit. Eiko eventually discovered this affair too. By this point, their marriage was in complete chaos. It wasn't just the infidelity, their financial situation was also dire. Although Iwao earned good money, a salary worth tens of thousands of dollars annually, and even though living costs in Japan were high at the time, it was still a comfortable income. Yet they had no money at home. Iwao had bought an apartment in Osaka, bragging about it being a great investment, but in reality, they were struggling to pay the interest when rates increased. Why not sell it? Because the apartment's purpose wasn't just investment, it was also a place for his affairs. It was horrifying. While having an affair with the married Haru, he was also dating 2 other women. Finally, Eiko couldn't take it anymore. She decided on divorce. "If you want to see other women like this, let's get divorced." Previously, Iwao would beg for forgiveness, promising to change and not repeat his behavior when caught cheating, though he was never sincere. But this time, his reaction was different. Perhaps it was because Haru had some special appeal. "She's the first woman who ever rejected me, a woman I can't have. That's so appealing." Iwao agreed to the divorce. "Fine, let's divorce. I love Haru more. I don't love you that much." Eiko was shocked by her husband's unexpected response. "Are you really serious?" In truth, she had mentioned divorce only out of anger, not really wanting to end the marriage. Finally, she begged, "I didn't really mean to divorce." But Iwao replied, "You were the one who brought up divorce first. You said it first." Despite being heartbroken by the betrayal, Eiko still wanted to preserve their family. She completely surrendered and said, "Fine, do whatever you want. You can see other women if you want, but we cannot divorce." She even set up rules allowing Iwao to have affairs, as long as he didn't divorce her. The rules Eiko established included: no overnight stays outside, must be home on weekends, must love her at the same time. If not real love, then at least pretend to love her. If violated, he would have to pay 100 million yen, approximately 1 million US dollars, in compensation, and 1 million yen, 10,000 US dollars, monthly for child support. It was pitiful. Afraid of being abandoned by her husband, she set these conditions to maintain their relationship, even if just for show. As a woman, as a human being, her dignity and heart must have been shattered. Iwao casually agreed and even signed the agreement, thinking it's just a piece of paper. With this agreement, Iwao could freely meet other women as he wished. Such a marriage couldn't possibly last. Iwao soon had a new girlfriend, Sakura, a nurse 6 years his junior, age 23, who also worked at the same hospital. Sakura was in a serious relationship with another doctor, and they were preparing for marriage. At this time, while still involved with Nurse Haru, Iwao began pursuing Sakura. When Sakura refused him because she knew he was married and she had a boyfriend, Iwao lied that he was in the process of getting divorced. A few months later, in March 1994, Sakura came to Iwao crying, confiding that she suspected her boyfriend of cheating. She had seen him kissing another nurse. Iwao saw this as a perfect opportunity. He had his wife's permission to have affairs and began bad-mouthing Sakura's boyfriend. "I heard he has no intention of marrying you. Rumors say he's trying to meet someone else." From then on, Iwao and Sakura began leaving work together, drinking and talking on the phone every night, gradually becoming closer. From August 1994, Sakura completely ended things with her doctor boyfriend and officially started dating Iwao, believing his promise of divorce. "Don't worry, I'll divorce soon. It's just taking time because of child custody issues, but it will happen soon. And so began yet another of Iwao's affairs. About 3 weeks after officially starting to date Sakura, Iwao violated his agreement with Eiko, the clause about not staying out overnight. How could someone with such desires control himself? He didn't come home. Eiko was furious. Who is she? You violated our agreement, so I need to talk to her. Call her now. Iwao adamantly refused to reveal anything. Finally, after 2 weeks of fierce arguments, he was forced to give Sakura's phone number. Eiko called immediately. I'm your boyfriend's wife. Let's meet. And they did meet. That day, Eiko's spirit was completely crushed when Sakura, despite being the other woman, dared to boast, Do you know how well your husband treats me? This bag was his gift to me. Sakura deliberately brought along a designer bag worth thousands of dollars to provoke Eiko. I absolutely cannot break up with him. He said he'll divorce you, so hurry up and divorce him. Sakura was 8 years younger than Eiko, and her arrogant attitude made Eiko furious. Upon returning home, Eiko called Sakura's mother, demanding she discipline her daughter and threatening legal action if they continued seeing each other. To Iwao, she declared, I absolutely won't divorce you. If you want a divorce, you violated our contract, so you must pay 100 million yen in compensation and 1 million yen monthly for child support, right? Pay up and then I'll divorce you. Iwao began to hesitate. 100 million yen. I don't have that much money. I've spent it all on affairs, buying bags for one woman, an apartment for another. 1 million yen monthly is my entire salary. How can I see other women then? After thinking it through, he decided not to divorce and that it would be better to continue seeing other women. At this point, he started apologizing to Eiko, saying they should try again. Iwao took the children to Disneyland and hot springs, trying to play the role of a good husband and father. Eiko once again softened and accepted him. But this was just Iwao's facade. He continued seeing Sakura, going to love hotels, telling her, Wait a little longer, I'll convince her for a smooth divorce. Eiko knew nothing about this. She wanted to trust her husband but felt uneasy inside. She became depressed, easily angered by small things, and frequently had major arguments with Iwao. She no longer wanted to sleep in the same bed with him or cook for him. Her mental illness became so severe that she couldn't do housework, and even taking care of the children became difficult. Her life became completely meaningless. Then one day, about 2 months after Iwao started his affair with Sakura, he stayed out overnight again. He lied about being on a business trip, but when Eiko called the hospital to check, they said there was no business trip. He had gone out with Sakura. Eiko waited at home, determined to confront him when he returned. When Iwao came home late, he still pretended to be a good father. Honey, kids, daddy's home. He even brought a souvenir, chicken-shaped manju buns from the airport. Eiko was completely furious. You buy designer bags for Sakura, but only manju buns for me? You're truly terrible. I know you two went out together. It wasn't receiving the manju buns that bothered her, but the feeling that she was worth only 1% of a designer bag, reflected in such a trivial gift. They had a fierce argument and didn't speak to each other until the next day. The next evening, around 8 p.m., Iwao returned home after his shift. There was no dinner. He bought a bento box from a convenience store and played with the children. At night, the children slept upstairs while Iwao, being at odds with his wife, couldn't go to the bedroom and slept on the sofa. Around 4 a.m., Eiko woke her husband up and said, Come sleep in the bed. Although she hated her husband, there was still a trace of tenderness in her heart. Despite her anger, she wanted reconciliation and was willing to forgive if he apologized. So she made the first move, but Iwao responded, Forget it, Eiko. Don't wake me up. You hate sleeping with me anyway. That moment sparked a violent argument between them in the early morning hours. Eiko had reached her breaking point and threatened, Tomorrow I'll call the hospital director and get both you and Sakura fired. After more than an hour of arguing, in her rage, Eiko grabbed a knife and rope, shouting, Kill me! Just kill me! At that moment, Iwao began strangling Eiko with the rope until she stopped breathing. But he didn't stop there. Iwao went upstairs where the children were sleeping soundly, unaware of anything. Similarly, he strangled the children, ages 3 and 1, those tiny throats. When police asked why he killed the children too, he justified it by saying, "I felt sorry for children who would have a murderer for a father." What an absurd reason. If he truly cared for his children, he should have committed suicide and let them live. The truth was, he killed the children because he didn't want the responsibility, because they were obstacles to his relationships with other women. Moreover, Iwao had only married Eiko because of her pregnancy. If it weren't for the pregnancy, if it weren't for these kids, I could have enjoyed life freely until I was 33. Why did pregnancy have to waste the golden years of my life? Without a moment's hesitation, he went upstairs and murdered his children. It was Saturday morning, October 29th. After brutally murdering his entire family, he wondered what to do next. Since he was on weekend duty, he went to work as usual. After committing such a horrific act, a normal person would be panicked and unable to work, calling in sick. But despite facing this situation, he still went to work. His fellow doctors and nurses reported seeing no unusual signs in Iwao's behavior. He returned home after his shift, and another day passed with the bodies still in the house. On Sunday night, October 30th, he decided to dispose of the bodies in the sea. Iwao loaded his family's bodies into his car trunk and headed for Yokohama. On the way, this madman thought, "Oh, it's been a while since I've been to Shinjuku. Should I stop by Kabukicho?" With 3 bodies in his trunk, he still went to watch a strip show in Kabukicho. But that wasn't all. Afterward, he visited a soapland, a bathhouse that was actually a front for prostitution. He was clearly deranged. If he had felt any remorse, how could he do such things? How could he have sexual desires at a time like this? His wife and children's bodies were in his trunk, and even in death, Eiko was forced to accompany her husband to a brothel. What about the innocent children? He indulged himself until dawn, and around 2 a.m., he finally drove along the Metropolitan Expressway to Daikoku Port in Yokohama. He parked his car on a bridge near a canal, turned on his hazard lights, and one by one, threw the bodies into the sea. The next day, he went to a travel agency to book tickets for a trip to Hokkaido with Sakura. "Finally, I'm free," he thought. No need to pay compensation, no need for divorce, no longer a father. He even deliberately called his in-laws. "Father, how are you? Are Eiko and the children there?" When told they weren't there, he feigned surprise. "I thought they went to your house 2 days ago." Only then did he report them missing to the police. "Officer, my wife sometimes goes to her parents' house without telling me." I thought she was there. He had even calculated carefully, not reporting them missing immediately for fear of suspicion, but waiting a while, asking his father-in-law first, then reporting to the police. He had planned it meticulously. When Aiko's body was discovered in the Yokohama Canal, followed by the bodies of Amy and Yusaku, investigators identified Iwao as the prime suspect. Initially, they had no evidence, but they were able to track his car's movements. Although it was 1994, Tokyo's highways already had license plate scanning equipment, known as the N system. When checking the scanner near Daikoku Port, they confirmed Iwao's car had passed through. Iwao persistently denied ever going near Tokyo, but when police presented evidence that his car had been at the port, he finally confessed after 3 weeks of denial. In 1996, Iwao's trial began. Iwao and his lawyer argued this was an impulsive killing. This was an act of passion. Eiko provoked me by telling me to kill her, causing me to lose control of my anger and commit the crime. This was not premeditated. However, when examining the case closely, there were several suspicious points. One was the autopsy results of the children. In their stomachs were pieces of undigested chocolate. Chocolate melts quickly. At temperatures above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius, it completely melts and digests within an hour. But the chocolate in their stomachs was still in solid form, indicating they were killed right after eating it. But Iwao had claimed he killed Eiko at 5 a.m. and immediately went upstairs to kill the children. If so, why would he wake the children up after 4 a.m. to feed them chocolate? Something didn't add up in his testimony. Furthermore, an acquaintance of Eiko testified that she had visited their home the evening before the murders, around 7:30 p.m. At that time, the children were eating chocolate. When leaving, she coincidentally met Iwao returning home and exchanged brief greetings. Therefore, based on the witness testimony and autopsy results, the murders likely occurred shortly after Iwao returned home, about 30 to 40 minutes after his return, not in the early morning. How could he suddenly develop the intention to kill in such a short time? It's possible that Iwao had planned the murders before coming home, perhaps even days in advance. He wanted a divorce but didn't want to pay compensation and child support. Another suspicious point was the possibility of an accomplice. When the bodies were discovered, all 3 bags were tied with rope, but the knots were different. 2 bags had common knots, but one had a special tawara knot, a method Japanese farmers traditionally use to tie rice bags. Initially, investigators thought that since Iwao came from a rural area, he might have learned this knot in his youth. However, when they asked him to replicate the knot during crime scene reenactment, he couldn't do it. He tied a completely different type of knot. In fact, Iwao was purely academic. From childhood, he only focused on studying and never helped with farming work, so he had no knowledge of how to tie such knots. Could there have been an accomplice? The investigation team surveyed who might be able to tie this type of knot. Among the farmers interviewed, only elderly people were familiar with the tawara knot, while younger people like Iwao generally didn't know this technique. Additionally, the case was discovered when Aiko's body surfaced. When bodies decompose, they generate gas, which is why despite the heavy weight attached, the body's buoyancy from the gas caused it to float. But Iwao was a doctor who had studied forensic medicine in medical school and done practical training. He understood better than anyone that bodies could float to the surface. So disposing of the bodies in the sea seemed odd. Could someone else have disposed of the bodies? Could someone who knew how to tie the tawara knot have helped him? However, nothing was ever officially proven. At trial, the prosecutor sought the death penalty for Iwao. This was a premeditated murder, and killing children shows he had abandoned his humanity. This is an unforgivable crime. The defense persistently argued that this was an impulsive killing. This was crucial because it would determine whether the defendant received the death penalty or life imprisonment. In court, Iwao repeatedly said, "I acted in anger and deeply regret it. I am truly remorseful." After enjoying his life and committing murder, his plea for a reduced sentence seemed illogical, but surprisingly, Iwao had a good reputation in society. The court received over 3,000 petitions on his behalf. This reflected Iwao's character perfectly, neglecting his family while carefully maintaining his public image. The judge finally delivered the verdict. The defendant repeatedly committed adultery without any moral conscience. Despite being a doctor who learned about the sanctity of life, he took the lives of others. The victims' families have suffered immense trauma and pain. However, the defendant has not shown strong antisocial tendencies or risk of crimes against society, has confessed, and has shown deep remorse. For these reasons, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment. But Iwao wasn't satisfied and appealed. Instead of being grateful for escaping the death penalty and dedicating his life to atoning for his murdered wife and children and their families, he appealed. The case went to the Tokyo High Court, but ultimately, the life sentence was upheld. Although the court concluded that it was an impulsive act, there were many details that suggested that this could have been a planned murder. This case shocked Japanese society at that time and left many painful lessons about the consequences of an immoral lifestyle and extreme selfishness, and that is today's case. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.